this week as we talk about all the care work and all the tasks that need to be done to take care of ourselves and the people that we care about and the places that we live. What we're actually talking about is a sociological term called the second shift. And so the second shift was kind of some of the seminal research in sociology of families. It was done from 1976 to 1988, so like 12 years. Um, by Arlie Hochschild and I think a couple of graduate assistants that did ethnographic research. So they did observations. They basically hung out with families for a long time and studied kind of how the division of labor happened. But we need to really think about the time in which this was researched. 1976, 1988. They were looking only at heteronormative relationships, right? Only male female relationships. And that really, looking outside of masculinity and femininity in relation to care work, starts to disrupt the ideas that we often kind of make assumptions about in relation to care work. Um, it's kind of the end of the time, like the 60s and 70s was considered in some ways, women were working outside the home for the first time. Now many, many, many women who were from working class backgrounds where finances were tight have always been working outside the home. This was when sometimes the first middle class white women were working outside the home. So, in the grand scheme of today's studies, it's not incredibly representative, but it did find some interesting things that still kind of persist today and really shape the way that we can look at the fact that all this care work adds up. So, speaking of it adding up, this is actually my kitchen at home. So, in um, 2019, it was our 20th wedding anniversary, and we decided to go to IKEA and get some cabinets and countertops to replace the 1976. See, the Arlie Hochschild second shift here, cabinets and countertops. We're very, very, very lucky. Like, I adore our little house. And so, this is our kitchen, and look at it, it's all nice and clean. But last year, I paid attention for a few nights, and this is how it ends up looking after I cook dinner. I caught Sean in that picture because he's always in the kitchen just as much as I am, if not more. We'll talk about that in a second. Right? Apparently, I don't close anything. Yeah. Like, how long does this take us to clean up? Do we both do it? Yes, depending on who has more schoolwork that they need to get done and stuff like that. This semester, I am pretty darn busy. And so Sean has not only kind of taken on more than kind of the division of labor that we usually have, which is pretty split. But he also has been really, really kind about it. I'm very lucky that every time I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't unload the dishwasher today. He's like, no big deal. Like everything, I don't know, talk to us in a couple months. He'll be like, I'm tired too. The idea of the fact that every single night, pretty much, I mean, we get takeout, come on now. But every single day, at some point, I make a mess in the kitchen and we constantly clean it up. Every day, I mean, it's a rare day around here that the dishwasher doesn't run. And then there's, dishes that are done kind of on the side to the stuff you don't put in the dishwasher. Every day, oh my God, I don't understand what happens to our countertops. So, the amount of just dirt, I guess, that ends up on them, like in 12 hours. So I end up wiping them down every day, that type of thing. Um, and then, like for instance, I don't want to brag, but tonight's dinner was barbecue chicken quesadillas with like pineapple. And I had a little sprinkle of blue cheese. If you like blue cheese, it's really good in there. For those of you who don't, you're like, ugh. But like I deglazed the pan that I sauteed the chicken in with beer. And then I like simmered the chicken in like the beer barbecue sauce mixture. It was really, really good. But how did that happen tonight? It's because I planned the meals we were going to eat on Saturday before Sean went to the grocery store. And like all of those, like not just the cooking and the cleaning, but all of those other tasks that happen too that maybe we don't always think about. Like, how long does it take us to clean up the kitchen? We could make an estimate, but we don't really know because so often, even though so many of us are responsible for this work, we don't necessarily pay attention to it. So, what Arlie Hochschild found was that there's a dual burden of paid and unpaid work experienced by working women. Again, she was looking at heteronormative relationships. And the term second shift came from one of the people that she was observing, said, my gosh, I go to work and it's like I work a whole shift there, and then I have to come home and I have a whole second shift. So that's how the terminology came up. And so what Hochschild found from her observations is that women were working 15 hours longer than men each week. And if you actually take 15 times 52, right, 52 weeks in a year, it's pretty darn close to 30 times 24. So 1 month of 24-hour days. So look at your clock right now. Is it 7:13 at night? Is it 11:52 at night and you should go to bed? Is it 9:12 in the morning? Like, look at your clock. And then imagine if you started working right this minute, round the clock, nonstop for a month, and you did that every year. It's a lot of work. In some of the classes that I teach, like sociology of gender, when I get a chance to teach Introduction to Women's Studies, we talk about the wage gap pretty extensively. But Hochschild points out the fact that there's not just a wage gap in relation to gender, there's also this leisure gap. Like if you're doing all this kind of work, you don't necessarily have time to sit down and watch your favorite show, or you don't have time to go meet a friend for coffee, or you don't have time to get a full night's sleep. So, like I said, it kind of adds up as we go through our days and weeks. It's largely ignored though in so many ways. Like if I would imagine you kind of struggled at times as we did activities this week, like we did our discussion and kind of looking at all of the care work that's done around our homes and families and whoever it is that we take care of or who takes care of us. But salary.com for years, they kind of have stopped, which really bugs me. Salary.com for years tried to add up how much all of this work was worth. And you can see this in front. There's a few of the years as we go by. And if you look on the left, especially, I know the one in the middle is a little bit harder to read, but you have younger eyes than I have. So maybe you can see it just fine. Um, some of the things that you wouldn't necessarily think of, right? Like psychologist, IT person, like plumber, like all these different things. You're gonna try and fix the clogged sink before you call a plumber to walk in the door for $150. Somebody's Chromebook, for their seventh grade science project that they need to have a PowerPoint for in the morning or Google Slides, whatever. They need to get it fixed. Like all these types of things. What they did was they surveyed women, took down all of the different tasks they said they did on behalf of themselves and their families, went to the median incomes for all of those careers and tried to conceptualize the amount this way. So if you can see 2019, they kind of started to change what they were doing in 2020. And 2020, I think, was the last year that they did it. But look at 2019 over there on the chart with all the green lines. $178,000. That's what all of this work is worth. Would you like a check for $178,000? Because I sure as heck would. Because I'm not a full professor. I'm a lecturer. Like, I don't make, I'm teaching 6 classes this semester, and I'll have taught, like, I don't know, um, 4, 10, maybe 11, 12 classes this year. Hopefully, I get some summer school classes. And I make maybe a quarter of that, yeah, or so. Like, a lot of your teachers at Cal State do not get paid very well. But like, wouldn't we take, I mean, I'm sorry, I'd take a check for $17, quite honestly. Like, no checks are showing up at our house for all of this work that's being done. So, because we live in a capitalistic society where we kind of measure everything's worth by like money, if we don't get paid for this, we kind of act like it's not really work in some ways, even though it is. So, thinking about the way that it gets valued and thinking about the way that we don't always like pay attention to the time investment. Because I mean, what are we going to do? We got to eat. What are we going to do? We got to scrub a toilet every once in a while, at least, I hope, right? So, thinking about the way that we conceptualize worth in our society, and if all of this care work is rarely ever paid for, I kind of think it's not worth anything. Here's some other kind of, if you look and like add this all up together. If the annual wage for housekeepers, which it's not really a terribly fair wage, nor is laundry workers. Average shelf salary, okay, I mean, we're getting there. Childcare, can you imagine? That's like almost $3,000 per month. And then thinking of a world of like Lyfts and Ubers. Like, think about how many parents have kids on travel sports teams and somebody has their band concert tonight. And like, they live in their car if they have, two or three kids. So, like, they're just driving around from here to there to get everybody in their family where they need to go for the myriad of reasons. But again, how the finances of all this add up. Then thinking about that gender component. And so here are some imagery about kind of the like, we're not very kind-hearted. We have very high expectations for people who are parenting that identify as feminine, right? But we also get really excited as a society. If somebody who's masculine does the bare minimum in parenting, they are amazing caretakers, right? And so, kind of thinking again, the things that we've observed in relation to, and the assumptions that we might make about who's supposed to do what, supposed to kind of being in quotations, right? Like air quotes. Um, it's interesting. Like I said before, I'm very, very lucky. Like Sean cleans as much and you don't want to trust me as much as I can tell you everything that I cooked, and I love to cook. You don't want to trust me with a knife. So like he cuts everything in advance or, grates a whole bunch of cheese or whatever. That's, quesadillas and all. But it's interesting because he grew up, his family, his parents taught him and his brother, like, no, you contribute, you learn how to do laundry. This is what we all do to make our family happen. And so, because of that socialization, that's the norm to him. You contribute to your family. That's not necessarily the way that everybody who identifies as masculine is raised, right? Think about cultural norms in a lot of cases. And so it's interesting because I have a partner that I'm so lucky to have that does so much. I interestingly hear about it fairly often, about how lucky I am. And now I'm not saying I'm not. I just said twice I'm very lucky. I'm not saying, well, that's how it should. No, 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 no. But if you think about this, would he ever hear, Nora does all the laundry? Nora, like, no. So, like, flip that script, and no, you can kind of see the fact that there is still this expectation, the default person. And what Arlie Hochschild found is even when somebody who identifies as feminine in a heteronormative relationship has a partner that does contribute a lot, that person who identifies as feminine, that person who identifies like a woman, still feels like everything technically should fall to them and still feels the pressure, the like mental pressure of all of the tasks. So, what we're kind of hopefully, and you get to think about this, right? Think about what you observed growing up. Think about what you want in the future. Think about how, like I mentioned, how Sean was raised by his parents and how his brother was raised. How do you think kids should be raised in relation to doing care work around the house? What age should they be included? Because I'm sorry, you give a 3-year-old a broom, they're going to think it's a grand old time. They're not going to sweep very well, but they're going to be really entertained by it. And you can start to, if you have the patience to be like, no, this is how we do it right, right? You give a 13-year-old a broom for the first time and be like, okay, it's your turn to start helping out. They're going to be like, no, that's your job, right? So, like, kind of what's that sweet spot? So, egalitarian relationships, no, regardless of who is, if it's a heteronormative relationship or if it's not, right? That it's two women in love, two men in love, right? But egalitarian relationships are about looking at a more even division of labor between people and thinking through like working to your strengths and how to divide up the work in a way. The thing I want to leave you with is what Arlie Hochschild found when she was again looking at women, and they would kind of, she consistently see women with very similar lives. They'd have like the same number of kids, their job would be like the same level of stressors or time, that type of thing. And so consistently she would see women with very parallel lives. They'd either have a partner that helped or didn't help around the house. And some of them would be like kind of reporting like kind of just downtrodden and a level of overwhelm, and they're not feeling real satisfied with their life. And others that are living very similar lives are like, no, I'm good, feeling pretty level of happiness and satisfaction. And so, I mean, granted, there's going to be a lot of variables that come into this, but Hochschild started to kind of poke around and figure out, like, what could this be that would make such a difference? And she found one variable, one thing that the women that had reported levels of happiness and satisfaction were hearing from their families, that the women that were kind of overwhelmed and not very satisfied were not hearing from their families. Two words: thank you. The work's not invisible. Thank you. Like, I acknowledge it. Because, friends, we're not going to get a check for $178,000. We're not going to get a check for $17. But we sure as heck can say thank you.